December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. German SS troops laughed as they inspected a captured American rifle lying in the snow. 8 shots fired. One officer scoffed in German, lifting his Kar 98K. "We need only one." 3 hours later, that same officer would discover why American infantrymen called the M1 Garand the gun that won the war. What followed didn't just silence their mockery, it changed the rules of infantry combat forever. The M1 Garand, left in that Belgian forest, revealed a catastrophic miscalculation by the German High Command. American industrial ingenuity applied to infantry warfare. While German soldiers still relied on bolt-action rifles, requiring manual cycling between shots, every American rifleman wielded a semi-automatic weapon capable of firing as fast as he could pull the trigger. The numbers told a story German intelligence had overlooked. A skilled German soldier with a standard Kar 98K could fire roughly 15 rounds per minute. The M1 Garand, officially the United States rifle, caliber .30, could deliver 40 to 50 aimed shots in the same time. This wasn't a minor advantage, it was a revolution in firepower, tripling American infantry effectiveness. General George S. Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. His statement wasn't exaggeration, it was math. A single American squad of 12 men, each armed with an M1 Garand, could match the volume of accurate fire produced by a German platoon of 40 soldiers with Kar 98Ks. The impact was staggering, yet German commanders entering the Ardennes offensive believed their veteran troops' tactical superiority would overwhelm what they saw as mechanically dependent American forces. The M1's development began in 1936 when John Garand, a Canadian-born engineer at Springfield Armory, perfected a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle built to endure combat conditions. The weapon weighed 9.5 pounds, measured 43.6 inches long, and fired the powerful .3006 Springfield cartridge from an 8-round on-block clip. Its distinctive ping when the clip ejected became one of the most recognizable sounds of World War II. By December 1944, American industry had produced over 4 million M1 Garands. From Normandy to the Philippines, every American infantryman carried one. The weapon had proven itself in North Africa, Italy, and France. Still, German forces, especially the elite SS divisions assembled for the Ardennes offensive, remained convinced that American soldiers relied too heavily on their equipment and that superior German training and aggression would dominate in close combat. The SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division, leading the northern push of the German offensive, had been explicitly briefed that American infantry would crumble under aggressive assault. Their intelligence acknowledged the Americans' firepower advantage, but concluded that SS shock tactics and surprise would neutralize it. The morning of December 16th seemed to confirm their expectations as German forces overran thinly held American positions, capturing equipment and prisoners along a 50-mile front. That abandoned M1 Garand in the snow represented everything German commanders thought they understood about American soldiers. Superior equipment left behind by men lacking the will to use it. Within hours, that assumption would prove disastrously wrong. The German miscalculation regarding the M1 Garand wasn't merely tactical, it was mathematical. Fire superiority in infantry combat follows a harsh arithmetic German planners had failed to account for in their Ardennes strategy. The numbers were unforgiving, and American forces were about to demonstrate why. In conventional infantry doctrine, the side that delivers accurate fire on target first usually wins. The Kar 98K, despite its legendary accuracy and reliability, required the shooter to manually operate the bolt after each shot, pull back, eject the spent casing, chamber a new round, close the bolt, reacquire the target, and fire. This cycle took roughly 3 to 4 seconds for a trained soldier. The M1 Garand eliminated every step except aiming and pulling the trigger. An American soldier could fire, automatically chamber the next round, and fire again in about 1 second. The U.S. Army Infantry School at Fort Benning had conducted extensive trials comparing bolt-action and semi-automatic rifles. Their findings, classified until after the war, showed that semi-automatic rifles didn't just increase the rate of fire, they fundamentally changed infantry combat dynamics. Soldiers with M1 Garands could maintain continuous aimed fire while maneuvering, something impossible with bolt-action rifles that forced soldiers to stop, operate the bolt, and re-aim for each shot. German after-action reports from previous campaigns had noted American firepower advantages, but attributed them to artillery and armor support. The Wehrmacht's tactical doctrine emphasized marksmanship and disciplined fire with bolt-action rifles, values honed over decades of military tradition. Elite units like the SS prided themselves on precision shooting, confident that well-aimed single shots from superior positions would overcome the American volume of fire. This confidence carried into the planning of the Ardennes offensive. German intelligence estimated that surprise and aggressive infiltration would close engagement distances to ranges where American firepower advantages would be negligible. At close quarters, they believed German combat experience and tactical skill would dominate. They had studied American actions in the Hürtgen Forest and concluded that U.S. forces became disorganized and ineffective when German troops closed to within 50 meters. What German planners failed to grasp was that the M1 Garand had fundamentally altered the calculus of close-quarters combat. In previous wars, closing distance reduced the enemy's ability to fire effectively because bolt-action rifles became cumbersome at short range. The M1 Garand, however, became even more lethal as distances decreased. An American soldier could sweep his rifle across multiple targets, firing as fast as he could acquire them without ever breaking his stance to operate a bolt. The technical specifications told the story German intelligence had missed: muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second, effective range of 500 yards, and devastating lethality at any distance. The gas-operated rotating bolt locked securely for each shot, delivering accuracy on par with any bolt-action rifle while cycling automatically in a fraction of a second. The .3006 Springfield cartridge produced 2,800 foot-pounds of energy, enough to penetrate German winter uniforms and body armor at any combat range. December 16, 1944, 5:30 hours. The German artillery barrage that marked the start of Operation Watch on the Rhine shattered the pre-dawn silence across 85 miles of American front. For 30 minutes, more than 1,600 German artillery pieces and rocket launchers pounded American positions with a ferocity not seen on the Western Front since 1940. The SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division, positioned near Losheim Gap, prepared to exploit what they expected would be a complete collapse of American defenses. The Spearhead Formation, led by SS Obersturmbannführer Furwa, moved forward at 6 o'clock hours with 117 tanks and 4,800 men. Their orders were clear: advance at maximum speed, bypass resistance, and push for the Meuse River bridges. Furwa had been assured that American infantry in his sector were green replacements from the 99th Infantry Division, troops inexperienced and expected to break under aggressive assault. His intelligence briefings emphasized that these Americans had only recently arrived and had never faced major combat. What German intelligence had failed to note was that every one of those green American soldiers carried an M1 Garand and had spent the past 2 weeks training with it intensively. The 99th Division's commander, Major General Walter Lauer, had personally emphasized marksmanship and rapid-fire drills. Knowing that his inexperienced troops' best chance against veteran German forces was superior firepower, the first German assault struck American positions near Landscheid at 6:30 hours. A reinforced company of German paratroopers advanced through the morning fog, expecting to overrun a token American roadblock. Instead, they encountered a reinforced platoon of the 99th Division's Intelligence and Reconnaissance Unit, just 18 American soldiers commanded by First Lieutenant L. Balck. Balck's men occupied positions in a forested area overlooking the road junction. Each soldier was armed with an M1 Garand and equipped with extra ammunition, with clear fields of fire extending out to 300 yards. As the German paratroopers emerged from the fog in parade ground formation, a shock tactic intended to intimidate defenders, Balck gave the order to fire. What followed in the next 90 seconds defied every German tactical expectation. 18 M1 Garands opened fire simultaneously, each rifle capable of emptying its 8-round clip in under 10 seconds. The mathematics were devastating. 18 rifles times 8 rounds equals 144 bullets in the first volley, all delivered with aimed accuracy at soldiers advancing in the open. Before the German troops could comprehend what was happening, before their officers could issue orders to disperse, before they could even take cover, the first wave collapsed. The distinctive rapid crack of the M1 Garand echoed through the Ardennes forest. starkly different from the slower bang, pause, bang of bolt-action rifles. The Fallschirmjäger, elite troops who had fought from Crete to Normandy, had never faced sustained semi-automatic fire from a defensive position. They expected the firing to pause as defenders worked their bolts. Instead, it intensified. German after-action reports would later describe the engagement with confusion and frustration. The Americans were not supposed to maintain such volumes of fire. This simply did not exist in any tactical assessment. The German paratroopers at Landscheid attempted to adapt, but the M1 Garand's capabilities had fundamentally altered the tactical equation. As the first wave fell, German NCOs screamed orders to disperse and take cover. Survivors dove into roadside ditches and behind trees, desperately attempting to return fire with their Kar 98Ks. But every time a German soldier exposed himself to aim and fire, 3 or 4 M1 rounds struck him before he could cycle his bolt. Lieutenant Balk's platoon had practiced what they called suppressive rotation, a tactic impossible with bolt-action rifles. While half the platoon fired, the other half reloaded their 8-round clips. The M1's on-block clip system allowed soldiers to reload in roughly 2 seconds, eject the empty clip, insert a fresh one, release the bolt. This meant American fire never actually stopped. As soon as one soldier's rifle pinged empty, his neighbor was already firing. The German company commander, attempting to rally his men for a second assault, made a fatal error. He assumed American fire would slacken as they ran out of ammunition. He had calculated based on bolt-action doctrine, thinking each defender carried perhaps 60 rounds, meaning after several volleys they would need to conserve ammunition. But Balk's men had been resupplied the previous night with 500 rounds per man. They weren't conserving anything. At 7:30 hours, a second German assault came, this time with better tactical spacing and fire support from MG-42 machine guns. But the mathematics remained unchanged. The MG-42s, despite their fearsome cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, required exposed crews to operate. M1 Garand fire found the machine gun positions within seconds. German gunners realized that while they could suppress individual riflemen armed with bolt actions, they could not suppress 18 semi-automatic rifles firing from covered positions. German tactical doctrine emphasized fire and maneuver. One element suppresses the enemy while another advances. This worked when both sides used bolt-action rifles, as suppressive fire meant roughly equal volumes from both sides. But American M1 fire could not be suppressed by equivalent numbers of Kar 98Ks. For every German round fired, 3 American rounds answered. Maneuver elements found themselves pinned by defensive fire that should have been impossible. By 8 o'clock hours, the German paratroop company had suffered over 40% casualties without dislodging 18 American soldiers. This wasn't in any tactical manual. A reinforced company of elite troops should have overwhelmed a platoon in minutes, but the M1 Garand had rewritten those calculations. The German battalion commander monitoring the battle from his command post couldn't make sense of the radio reports. His men were describing automatic weapons fire from positions where intelligence indicated only riflemen. The confusion was understandable. The rate of fire from M1 Garands approached that of submachine guns, but with rifle accuracy and range. German soldiers, trained to recognize the sound signatures of different weapons, the slow crack of rifles, the rapid chatter of machine guns, were hearing something that didn't fit their categories. Semi-automatic rifle fire at this volume was beyond their combat experience. At 8:30 hours, the German commander committed his reserve company to the assault, doubling his attacking force. Surely, he reasoned, even with their mysterious firepower advantage, 18 Americans couldn't hold against 200 German paratroopers. The mathematics of numbers must prevail. The third German assault on Landscheid began at 8:45 hours. Over 200 paratroopers advancing in coordinated bounds, the best tactical approach their doctrine offered. Squad by squad, they moved forward using terrain for cover, with supporting fire from mortars and the few remaining MG-42s. This was combined arms infantry tactics executed by elite troops. Against conventional bolt-action defenders, it would have succeeded within minutes. Instead, the German advance stalled at 150 yards. At this range, the M1 Garand's advantages became even more pronounced. American soldiers could clearly identify individual targets and engage them rapidly. A German squad would rush forward 20 yards, hit the ground, and attempt to provide covering fire, only to find that half their number had been hit during the advance. Survivors returned fire, working their bolts frantically, but the volume differential was overwhelming. Private First Class William Slate, one of Balk's riflemen, later recalled this phase of the battle. You didn't have time to think about missing. You just acquired the target, fired, acquired the next target, fired. The rifle did everything else. By the time a German soldier could chamber his next round, I'd already engaged 3 of his buddies. It wasn't fair, but war isn't supposed to be fair. The German advance slowed to a crawl, then stopped entirely. Officers tried to rally their men, but the basic calculus had become painfully clear. Advancing meant death. Every movement drew instant fire from multiple American rifles. The Germans had no answer to sustained semi-automatic fire from prepared positions. Their tactical training, combat experience, and elite status meant nothing against such a fundamental firepower disparity. At 9:30 hours, SS Obersturmbannführer Furwa himself arrived at the Landscheid roadblock. Furious at the delay, his schedule called for him to be 10 miles beyond this position. He demanded an immediate assault with armor support. 2 Panther tanks moved forward, their commanders confident that the 75mm guns would silence the American position, regardless of the small arms defending it. The M1 Garand couldn't penetrate tank armor, but it could kill tank commanders. Panther commanders, observing from their open hatches to direct fire, were exposed targets. M1 rounds forced them to button up, closing hatches and relying on the limited vision of periscopes. Buttoned-up tanks in forested terrain without infantry support became vulnerable. The Americans hadn't stopped the tanks, but they had blinded them. 1 Panther struck a concealed anti-tank mine. The American position had been better prepared than German intelligence anticipated. The 2nd tank, unable to identify targets through periscopes and unwilling to expose its commander, fired blindly into the forest. At 10 o'clock hours, Furwa made a decision that would haunt German planning for the remainder of the battle. He bypassed Landscheid entirely, leaving a rear guard to contain the position while his main force sought alternative routes. 18 American soldiers with M1 Garands had delayed an SS camp of 4,800 men for nearly 5 hours. This was not supposed to be possible. By midday on December 16th, similar engagements were erupting across the Ardennes front. German assault forces, expecting rapid breakthroughs against demoralized American defenders, instead encountered the same withering semi-automatic fire that had stopped Furwa. What German planners had dismissed as isolated incidents began forming a pattern their doctrine could not explain. At Mannheim, on the northern shoulder of the German offensive, elements of the 2nd Infantry Division, veterans who had fought since D-Day, used their M1 Garands to devastating effect. German radio intercepts, decoded by Allied intelligence after the war, revealed the confusion. American fire volume inconsistent with reported troop strength. Request clarification on enemy automatic weapons deployment. The Americans were not deploying unusual numbers of automatic weapons. They were simply using M1 Garands as designed. Near St. Vith, the 106th Infantry Division, another green unit, according to German intelligence, was expected to collapse under the assault of the 18th Volksgrenade Division. Instead, American rifle companies held positions that German planners had expected to overrun within hours. After-action reports from German regimental commanders expressed bewilderment. Enemy riflemen maintained fire rates comparable to our MG-42s. Assault waves cannot close to effective range. The German High Command's intelligence briefings had acknowledged the M1 Garand but fundamentally misunderstood its battlefield impact. They knew Americans carried semi-automatic rifles, but they had vastly underestimated what those rifles could do in the hands of well-trained infantry. They hadn't realized that this represented a revolution in infantry combat. German tactical thinking, refined over 6 years of war, assumed rifle-armed infantry had predictable firepower capabilities. The M1 Garand had invalidated those assumptions. Lieutenant Colonel Furwa, finally breaking through American positions after committing his entire force, discovered another consequence of the M1's firepower advantage. The delay at Landscheid had allowed American forces to organize defenses at subsequent positions. Small groups of soldiers with M1 Garands could hold road junctions and bridges long enough for reinforcements to arrive, buying time that wasn't supposed to exist. German staff officers reviewing first-day results found impossible contradictions in their data. American units were taking heavy casualties, yet maintaining defensive integrity. Positions were being overrun, yet inflicting disproportionate German losses before falling. The mathematics didn't add up unless American firepower advantages were far greater than previously calculated. At his headquarters in Zenberg, Field Marshal von Rundstedt received reports that the offensive was behind schedule across the entire front. Individual unit actions were succeeding, but the rapid breakthroughs Operation Watch on the Rhine required were not materializing. American infantry resistance was orders of magnitude stronger than anticipated, von Rundstedt's operations officer noted in his diary. The Americans fight with a determination and firepower that contradicts all intelligence assessments. Every roadblock becomes a fortress. What German intelligence had failed to communicate, and what German tactical doctrine could not accommodate, was that the M1 Garand had fundamentally altered the exchange ratio in infantry combat. Where German doctrine assumed rough parity in small arms engagements, American forces enjoyed a 3-to-1 firepower advantage. Every tactical calculation based on conventional rifle combat became obsolete the moment the M1 Garand reached frontline troops. By December 20th, 1944, the critical road junction of Bastogne had become the focal point of the entire Ardennes campaign. The 101st Airborne Division, rushed into the town with minimal equipment, found themselves surrounded by German forces. Wehrmacht commanders encircling Bastogne believed they had trapped an American force that would inevitably surrender. They had not accounted for what 8,000 paratroopers armed with M1 Garands could accomplish. The German XLVI Panzer Corps, commanded by General Heinrich von Luttwitz, launched coordinated assaults on Bastogne's perimeter beginning December 21st. His forces included the 2nd Panzer Division, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, over 40,000 troops supported by 250 tanks. By conventional military logic, this force should have crushed the surrounded Americans within days. Instead, they faced defensive firepower that defied all calculations. At the village of Marvy, southeast of Bastogne, a single company of the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, about 120 men, faced an assault by nearly 2,000 German soldiers, an entire regiment. The engagement began at dawn, with German infantry advancing in company-strength formations, confident that their numerical superiority would overwhelm the American position. What they encountered was a lesson in modern firepower mathematics. 120 M1 Garands, fired from prepared positions by soldiers who had nothing to lose, created an impassable wall of lead. The German regimental commander reported back to division headquarters, "American defensive fire prevents any forward movement. Casualties mounting. Enemy appears to possess automatic weapons in quantities not previously reported." Once again, German officers could not reconcile what they were experiencing with their intelligence briefings. The Americans had no unusual concentration of automatic weapons. They simply had the M1 Garand. Staff Sergeant Robert Bowen, commanding a squad defending a critical crossroads, later described the tactical reality. "We knew we were surrounded. We knew help might not come, but every one of us had a full combat load, 80 rounds minimum, and we knew our rifles would fire every single one without jamming. The Germans had to work their bolts between shots. We just kept pulling triggers. Simple mathematics. We could put 3 bullets downrange for every one of theirs." Numbers don't lie. The German assault on Marvy collapsed after 4 hours, having gained only 200 yards at a cost of over 400 casualties. The American company suffered 18 killed and 34 wounded, but held their position. This exchange ratio, inflicting casualties at a 4-1 ratio while defending, was unprecedented in conventional infantry combat. The M1 Garand had made it routine. On December 22nd, German forces delivered an ultimatum to Bastogne's commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, demanding surrender. His famous one-word reply, "Nuts," was backed by the confidence that his soldiers' weapons gave them a fighting chance, despite being surrounded and outnumbered. McAuliffe understood something the Germans did not. Firepower could offset numerical disadvantage when the disparity was significant enough. Throughout the siege, German commanders repeatedly miscalculated the force required to overrun American positions. They would commit what doctrine suggested was adequate strength, only to find that M1 armed defenders could hold against double or even triple their numbers. A German battalion commander's report captured on December 23rd stated, "American riflemen defend with effectiveness comparable to our heavy machine gun positions." Assault tactics require revision, but there was no time for tactical revision. The German offensive had a strict timetable, and every day spent trying to reduce Bastogne was a day the strategic objective slipped further away. The M1 Garand wasn't just helping Americans hold positions, it was disrupting Germany's entire operational timeline. Each small group of soldiers with semi-automatic rifles became a roadblock that couldn't be quickly eliminated. a puzzle conventional tactics couldn't solve. By December 24, 1944, the psychological impact of facing M1 Garand-equipped American forces had begun to fundamentally erode German combat effectiveness. Soldiers who had fought across Europe with confidence now approached American positions with dread. The weapon that German intelligence had dismissed as merely a mechanical advantage had become a source of terror that tactical training could not overcome. Captured German soldiers, interrogated by American intelligence, revealed a dramatic shift in morale. A sergeant from the 12th SS Panzer Division stated, "We were told the Americans relied on their equipment because they lacked fighting spirit. But when you advance and your comrades fall before they can fire a second shot, when you cannot suppress their fire no matter how many rifles you have, you realize their equipment has given them something we cannot match. It is not cowardice to recognize when you face impossible odds. Psychological reports compiled by German medical officers showed unprecedented stress casualties. Soldiers were developing what would later be recognized as combat fatigue at rates far exceeding previous campaigns. The constant exposure to firepower they couldn't reciprocate, the mathematical certainty that advancing meant death, broke men who had survived years of combat on the Eastern Front. One German company commander wrote in his diary, "My men have faced Soviet artillery barrages, American air attacks, British tank assaults, but the sound of American rifles and sustained fire creates a fear I have never witnessed. They know the rifles will not stop, will not jam, will not pause." At Bastogne, the siege entered its critical phase. German forces, unable to reduce the American perimeter through conventional assault, resorted to artillery bombardment and attempts to starve the garrison into submission. But on December 26, elements of General George Patton's Third Army broke through the German encirclement. The lead elements of the relief column, tanks supported by M1 Garand armed infantry, shattered German blocking positions with the same firepower disparity that had defined the entire battle. German soldiers attempting to maintain the encirclement found themselves caught between two forces, both equipped with superior semi-automatic firepower. The psychological impact was devastating. Units that had fought tenaciously for days began surrendering in groups, something virtually unprecedented for German forces earlier in the war. An American intelligence report from December 27th noted enemy prisoners consistently cite American rifle fire as primary factor in their decision to surrender. Multiple subjects stated they saw no possibility of survival against continuous aimed fire. The Battle of the Bulge's outcome was determined by many factors: logistics, air power, armor, strategic reserves, but at the tactical level, in the forest clearings and snow-covered villages where infantry actually fought, the M1 Garand had proven decisive. German after-action reports captured and analyzed after the war repeatedly cited American infantry firepower as the factor that disrupted their tactical planning. One division commander wrote, "We calculated force requirements based on conventional rifle combat. The American semi-automatic rifle invalidated every calculation. A company of American infantry could defend against a battalion of our troops. This is not sustainable." The numbers confirmed what German commanders feared. In conventional infantry engagements during the Battle of the Bulge, American forces inflicted casualties at ratios between 2, 1, and 4, 1, even when defending. This was the inverse of expected results when facing numerically superior, tactically proficient German forces. The M1 Garand had quite literally reversed the mathematics of combat. By December 28th, the German offensive had clearly failed. They had advanced in some sectors, captured some territory, inflicted significant casualties, but had not achieved the breakthrough that Operation Watch on the Rhine required. The rapid advance to the Meuse River, the encirclement of Allied armies, the capture of Antwerp, all had proven impossible against American defenders whose rifles gave them a sustainable firepower advantage. The Battle of the Bulge officially ended on January 25, 1945. Germany's last major offensive in the West had cost them 100,000 casualties, 800 tanks, and, most critically, the psychological certainty that tactical skill could overcome material disadvantage. The M1 Garand hadn't won the battle alone, but it had provided American infantry with the decisive advantage at the point where wars are actually decided, in the firefights between soldiers. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his post-battle assessment, acknowledged the weapon's impact. The semi-automatic rifle has proven itself the superior individual infantry weapon of this war. Time and again, our forces have held positions and defeated attacks that conventional military wisdom suggested were indefensible. The M1 Garand has given the American soldier a firepower advantage that multiplies his effectiveness several times over. Statistical analysis conducted by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office confirmed what battlefield commanders had observed. In comparable engagements, similar terrain, similar tactical situations, similar force ratios, units equipped with M1 Garands inflicted casualties at rates 2.5 to 3 times higher than would be expected from bolt-action armed forces. This wasn't a marginal improvement. It was a fundamental shift in combat dynamics. The German General Staff, in the final months of the war, attempted to develop countermeasures. They rushed production of the Sturmgewehr 44, their own semi-automatic rifle, but industrial collapse meant only 425,000 were produced compared to over 5 million M1 Garands manufactured by American industry. The disparity in production mirrored the disparity on the battlefield. American industrial capacity had created a weapon advantage that German forces simply couldn't match. Post-war interviews with German commanders revealed the depth of their miscalculation. General Hasso von Manteuffel, who commanded the 5th Panzer Army during the Ardennes offensive, stated, "We knew the Americans had semi-automatic rifles. We did not understand that this represented a revolution in infantry combat. A single American squad could generate the firepower of a German platoon. This changed everything about how infantry combat functioned, and we failed to adapt our tactics in time." The M1 Garand's impact extended far beyond the Ardennes. In the final campaigns across Germany, American infantry advanced with a confidence born from firepower superiority. German defenders, demoralized by previous encounters with M1, armed troops often chose surrender rather than face the distinctive rapid crack of semi-automatic fire. The weapon that German SS troops had mocked in December 1944 had become the sound of inevitable defeat by March 1945. Lieutenant Lyle Balk's platoon at Lanzerath, the 18 soldiers who had held against thousands, received recognition after the war for their extraordinary stand. Balk himself was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, later upgraded to the Medal of Honor. But the real legacy of their fight was the lesson it demonstrated. Superior technology in the hands of determined soldiers could overcome overwhelming odds. The M1 Garand remained a standard American infantry rifle through the Korean War and into the early years of Vietnam. Its semi-automatic action, reliable performance, and devastating firepower set the standard for all subsequent military rifles. Modern assault rifles trace their lineage directly to the principles the M1 Garand proved in combat. Rate of fire matters, reliability matters, and firepower wins battles. Today, military historians recognize the M1 Garand as one of the truly decisive weapons of World War II. It didn't win the war through a single dramatic action, but through thousands of small engagements where American soldiers with superior rifles defeated enemies who should have overwhelmed them by numbers or tactical skill. The German mockery of only 8 shots had been answered with a definitive response. 8 well-aimed shots from a semi-automatic rifle, delivered in the time it takes to fire 2 from a bolt action, was enough to change the course of history. The true measure of the M1 Garand's impact became clear only in the decades following World War II, when military analysts could examine the complete arc of infantry weapons development. What emerged was a startling realization. The M1 Garand represented the single most significant leap in individual soldier lethality in the history of warfare. No other weapon had so fundamentally altered the balance of infantry combat in such a short time frame. Soviet military observers studying American tactics during and after the war reached conclusions that would shape their own weapons development for the next 50 years. Marshal Georgy Zhukov in his memoirs wrote, "The American semi-automatic rifle gave their infantry a capability we could not match until our own automatic weapons were widely distributed." In Korea, we observed that American soldiers with M1 Garands could hold positions against Chinese forces with numerical superiority of 5 or 6 to 1. This was not merely training or morale. It was the mathematical reality of firepower. The Korean War, erupting in June 1950, provided another proving ground for the M1 Garand. At the Chosin Reservoir in November 1950, surrounded U.S. Marine divisions faced overwhelming Chinese forces in conditions even more desperate than Bastogne. Chinese commanders employing human wave tactics based on Japanese experience from World War II expected to overwhelm American positions through sheer numbers. They had not accounted for what 15,000 Marines armed with M1 Garands could accomplish. Chinese after-action reports captured during later operations revealed the same pattern of miscalculation that had plagued German forces 6 years earlier. One Chinese regimental commander reported, "American defensive fire does not diminish as expected. Our assault waves suffer 40 to 50% casualties before reaching enemy positions. The continuous fire from American rifles prevents effective close combat. Recommend revised tactics acknowledging American firepower superiority of 3-1 over our forces." The Battle of Chipiongni in February 1951 demonstrated the M1's continued relevance. A reinforced U.S. regiment of 4,500 men, surrounded by 25,000 Chinese troops, held their perimeter for 2 days of continuous assault. The defenders fired an estimated 400,000 rounds of .3006 ammunition, nearly 90 rounds per soldier, maintaining such volumes of fire that Chinese forces never breached the defensive line. The exchange ratio was devastating. American forces suffered 52 killed while inflicting an estimated 5,000 Chinese casualties. By the mid-1950s, every major military power was developing semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles. The Soviet AK-47, the Belgian FNFL, and the German G3 all represented attempts to match or exceed the capability that the M1 Garand had demonstrated. John Garand's design, conceived in the 1930s, had set the standard that Cold War weapons development sought to achieve. The entire concept of the modern assault rifle emerged from the recognition that the M1 Garand had proven that individual soldiers armed with rapid-fire, reliable rifles could multiply their effectiveness several times over. The last combat use of the M1 Garand in significant numbers occurred in the early years of the Vietnam War, before the M14 and then the M16 replaced it. Even in jungle warfare, terrain vastly different from European forests, the M1 proved its worth. Veterans of both World War II and Vietnam testified that the weapon's reliability and stopping power made it superior to its successors in certain situations. One Marine gunner stated, "The M16 had more firepower, but when that M1 spoke, whatever it hit stayed down. There was a finality to it that newer rifles couldn't match." The statistics compiled across 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and early Vietnam, painted an undeniable picture. American forces armed with M1 Garands consistently achieved casualty exchange ratios far exceeding historical norms for infantry combat. The weapon had proven General Patton's assessment correct. It was indeed the greatest battle implement ever devised. Not through a single dramatic moment, but through the cumulative effect of thousands of engagements where American firepower superiority proved decisive. Up next, if this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass the stories our channel has. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon.